Greetings and welcome to ValoU. I'm Zaladrith and I'll be your instructor for today. Today's class is Tactics 231, Positional Probability. To help us break down concepts like timing, let's use positional probability to describe the number of possible locations an enemy can reasonably threaten you from, and for simplicity, just weight them equally. Since I hear Chamber's footsteps here, I know there's only one way he can swing me. However, due to my jet dash, I can either be out in the open, behind cover and wine, or at my actual position near sight. Knowing that he knows that there's three places I can be, I know that if I wait, he'll swing the corner and reduce my possible locations to just wine or sight. Since he has to expose himself to sight in order to grab Spike, it's far more likely he would gamble that I hadn't tried to risk reaching wine in time, reducing my possible locations to either just the right or left side of the entrance to sight when he scales up, since the classic vs. op matchup will be better for me at a closer range. In that scenario, most people would gamble on and watch the side that I'm standing on, since it's the angle they'd be exposing themselves to the most with their movement. So with a bunch of simplification and due to my original positioning choice, I would end up in his crosshairs in my expected case. Rather than giving him the time to start mentally reducing my possible positions through a combination of checking corners and gambling, I time my swing for when I envision that he switches from checking sight entrance to clearing wine and tight right, and I managed to catch the perfect timing on him instead. In short, I timed my swing for when there were three possible places I could be, rather than waiting for him to clear angles and reduce that to two or just one possibility. Now let's start out by building up positional probability from the simplest concepts. If the round has just begun and I have teammates covering the other lanes on the map, enemies can only peek me from one position, the left side of long. If I step behind cover to blink and check my minimap though, there now exists a timing that they could have crossed to the right side of long. The more time I spend behind cover, the more possible the timing becomes, now forcing me to respect two possible positions. At this point, I can gamble that no one is crossed and rely on a flick if I'm wrong. Or I can hold a different angle after the junction of those possible locations to consolidate it back into one possibility again. This balances retaining some map control with other risks like angle disadvantage, having no cover, getting smoked out, etc. From a tactical perspective, accounting for positional probability when defending map control is about minimizing the number of angles you can be swung from to maximize the effectiveness of crosshair placement. Now let's take another simple example where we can see an enemy running behind cover. Disregarding the cases where they don't swing, there's a 50-50 between whether they'll swing left or right. The moment after I see them go behind cover, technically they can only re-peek me from the right, since they wouldn't have had time to fully cross to the left side of cover. If I had a Vandal, perhaps I would have held the right side for a split second longer here. However, keeping in mind his speed and the context that we're in DM, instead I pre-fire the left side at the timing he would swing if he doesn't change his speed. Often when you see experienced players checking angles at seemingly random times and perfectly timing enemies, it's because a pathing prediction at a reasonable speed would result in an enemy appearing at a certain position, temporarily increasing its chances. However, experienced players also know this, so when they reposition, they might instead double back and re-peek a previous angle at the exact timing that they can appear at a new location, similar to our initial example. Ironically, less experienced players may do this accidentally, since they often take longer than necessary when moving and repositioning, resulting in unexpectedly slow timings or nonsensical, inefficient pathing. Now, let's apply positional probability to macro positioning. If my teammate Garage rotates to respond to pressure A, while I'll be safe for a few seconds, as more time passes, the fog of possible enemy locations will spread into Garage and then even to C-Link. If I want to prioritize safety, I can surrender even more map control to reduce the number of ways enemies can swing me down to one again. Or, if I properly utilize Shield and Sword, I can maintain some cover from those new angles and continue to hold, gambling on which side I'll be pushed from first. I can also keep re-peeking long angles to beat back the fog, greatly reducing the chance that I get caught unawares, at the risk of having to swing with my op instead of holding an angle. Aggressively taking space, while risky in the moment, can result in holding one position choke points that are safer and easier to hold, due to the way that the direction of traffic flows, making it extremely unlikely to get flanked. Surrendering space, on the other hand, while safe in the moment and often making it easier to defend yourself, opens up the possibility of your teammates getting flanked. From a macro perspective, accounting for positional probability when defending map control is about choosing what map control to defend and surrender to avoid you or your team getting flanked or pinched. Now, let's look at positional probability from the perspective of the aggressor. When swinging C-Long, there's 6 relatively reasonable locations that an opera can be, which, compared to your one peek angle, shows the strength of defender's advantage. However, a quick jump peek is a relatively low-risk way of clearing every possible position that's out in the open. If we take the usual case of the choke point being smoked out, simply stepping out of the smoke results in about 8 reasonable positions near cover, not even including the numerous off angles and one-and-done angles that don't have cover. In order to manage this, scouting util and flashes are used to punish anyone far from cover, and smokes cut off common reinforcement paths to isolate the skirmish. At this point, there's only about 5 pieces of cover left to shelter on the site, not including the 2 smoked off choke points that reinforcements can flood in from. If the attackers use a split attack, there's even fewer pieces of cover that are safe to use, which is why split attacks are so powerful. Stuns, mollies, additional scouting util and flashes, etc. are often dumped in to impair enemies behind the remaining cover so that the entries have some kind of advantage when clearing out the site. Movement utility can also create additional entryways into the site, whether through elevation, dashes, teleports, or even fake teleports, increasing the number of positions that defenders have to respect. If a defender swings while attackers flood in, there's a decent chance that there's enough attackers holding the angle to at least trade a kill. More importantly, if the defenders don't swing, entries will start clearing those pieces of cover one by one, until by process of elimination, attackers will be able to use numbers advantage to overwhelm them. This is why continuously falling back doesn't work. While in the beginning, attackers need to watch 5 pieces of cover for the swing. As each piece of cover gets cleared, that number dwindles until nowhere is unexpected and defender's advantage is eliminated via process of elimination. This is why repositioning is so strong. Even after your position is compromised, you can slip away and restore your positional probability, forcing enemies to have to respect more locations. A good way to do this is by playing around smokes to buy time, especially safety smokes, since they create pockets of space aggressors have to clear, allowing you to juke around by revisiting areas that they've already previously cleared. Teleports and fake teleports are also great ways to quickly restore positional probability, and can be extremely strong when used well. In summary, positional probability refers to the chances that an enemy is in a given position. You can counteract it as a defender by holding angles after junctions to reduce enemy positional probability. From a tactical perspective, reducing positional probability makes it easier to gamble on the correct crosshair placement. Timings can be predicted as more likely when additional positional probability opens up. From a macro perspective, accounting for positional probability involves surrendering, holding, or even taking map control to prevent you or your teammates from getting flanked. Aggressors have to use utility in numbers and clear angles to counteract the defender's advantage granted by positional probability. And repositioning is a powerful way to restore your positional probability. That's all for today's lesson. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the lecturer or the TAs in the comments below. Thanks for attending, and we hope you enjoy your stay here at ValoU.
One enemy remaining.
Shameful performance.
A. Defenders win.
Dead fools. Hold on to this moment. We can't stop here.